Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
Hey everyone, buckle up because today we're diving into a topic that's, well, let's just say it's going to make you look at the ground beneath your feet a little differently.
Yeah, we're talking about pole shifts,
Not just the magnetic kind either. We're going full-on cataclysmic.
the kind of event that could literally reshape the planet.
And our guide for this deep dive, a declassified CIA document.
Based on a book that was kept hidden for decades.
The Adam Eve story by a guy named Dr. Chan Thomas, published back in 1966.
And get this, only about a fifth of the original manuscript has actually been released.
Which, of course, makes you wonder what's in those missing pages.
What did they find so disturbing that they had to keep it under wraps?
Definitely adds a layer of mystery to all of this.
Absolutely. But we're not just going to be speculating here.
Nope. We'll be looking at geological evidence, ancient myths from all over the world.
Even tying in some recent scientific discoveries.
Trying to separate fact from fiction, so to speak.
Because whether we're talking about a full-blown crustal shift or just the more common magnetic pole shifts,
The implications for us today are huge.
imagine our tech-dependent world suddenly thrown into chaos.
Okay, so let's start with Dr. Thomas's vision of what a catastrophic pole shift would look like.
He doesn't hold back. He describes supersonic winds, mountains of seawater,
Continents being ripped apart. Molten earth spewing from the ground.
and the speed at which he says all this would happen.
That's what's really terrifying.
He's not talking about gradual change over centuries.
It's talking hours.
Your entire world transformed in the blink of an eye.
And as if that wasn't enough, Dr. Thomas goes on to say that this isn't just a one-time event,
He believes it's a cycle of destruction and rebirth.
a pattern that's been repeating throughout history,
He even suggests that we could be the sixth advanced civilization on Earth.
wiped out by these pole shifts, just like the ones that came before us.
It makes you think about all those ancient flood myths, right?
Noah's Ark, the stories from the Maya and the Hawaiians,
Could they be echoes of a shared traumatic experience?
like our collective memory trying to warn us about something.
And it's not just flood myths. We've got hints of lost civilizations, too.
The Sphinx, for example. Some researchers believe the erosion patterns suggest
It could be much older than we think.
potentially built by a civilization that predates the last known flood,
And then there's Atlantis.
that legendary city swallowed by the sea.
Some people believe the Richat structure in the Sahara Desert
Yeah, the Eye of the Sahara.
could actually be the remains of Atlantis.
And when you look at those strange ripple patterns in the Sahara,
It definitely looks like something massive happened there.
like a huge amount of water moved across the land.
Exactly. And speaking of lost continents,
There's also the idea of Mu, a hypothetical landmass in the Pacific.
mentioned in ancient Mayan and Indian texts,
Some researchers even connect it to Easter Islands and those mysterious Moai statues.
speculating that they might have been partially buried by some cataclysm.
It's amazing how these ancient stories and archaeological finds can make you question everything,
You start to see potential connections between cultures that seem completely unrelated.
like pieces of a giant puzzle scattered all over the world.
But the big question is, how could something like a pole shift actually happen?
I mean, we're talking about moving continents.
Well, Dr. Thomas goes into detail about that in his book.
Even includes a diagram.
He talks about the Earth's molten layers, disruptions in the magnetic and electrical fields,
And how the ice caps could act as a sort of lever.
causing the Earth's crust to shift around the core.
It's a pretty complex model, but the basic idea is,
These forces that we think of as stable, they can get out of whack.
and when that happens, the poles, the things we think of as fixed points.
They can suddenly move.
But of course, not everyone buys into Dr. Thomas's theories.
He's definitely a controversial figure,
Some critics point to the lack of hard evidence.
and they question whether he might have borrowed a bit too heavily from other catastrophists.
There are also a lot of misconceptions floating around about his book.
Some people claim the CIA is hiding the full version,
But the declassified document we have seems to be complete.
and the book was never actually banned.
But here's the thing. While some of his ideas might seem far-fetched,
Recent scientific findings actually back up some of his claims,
like those flash-frozen mammoths found with undigested food in their stomachs,
which suggests a sudden, catastrophic freeze.
And then there's the evidence of those massive tsunamis in the past.
Which brings us to a phenomenon that's happening right now.
The magnetic pole shift.
And this is where we need to be clear about the difference between geographic poles and magnetic poles.
Geographic poles are fixed.
But magnetic poles are constantly on the move,
And we're actually overdue for a magnetic flip.
where north becomes south and south becomes north,
The problem is the Earth's magnetic field is weakening.
which makes us more vulnerable.
So while a magnetic pole shift might not be the civilization-ending event that Dr. Thomas describes,
It could still disrupt our technology, our communication systems.
even our power grids,
Which begs the question, are we prepared for that kind of disruption?
makes you wonder if we're really in control or just along for the ride.
Yeah, definitely puts things into perspective. And while Dr. Thomas's ideas might be a bit out there,
Controversial for sure.
I think he raises some important questions
About history, about our place in the universe.
about whether we're truly prepared for the unexpected.
You mentioned earlier that some people don't buy into his theories.
Oh yeah, there are plenty of critics.
What are some of the main arguments against his work?
Well, one of the biggest criticisms is that he relies heavily on interpretations of ancient myths and texts.
Which can be pretty subjective.
Right, he often sees connections that other researchers might not.
And his interpretations aren't always backed up by solid scientific evidence.
Exactly. He's kind of filling in the gaps with his own theories.
So it's understandable why some people are skeptical.
And while he draws upon the work of other catastrophists,
He seems to sometimes pick and choose the evidence that supports his claims.
kind of overlooking anything that contradicts him.
It's like when you're putting together a puzzle.
And you're so focused on finding the pieces that fit your picture.
You might miss other possibilities.
Exactly. But we also have to remember that science is always evolving.
What might have seemed crazy decades ago.
Could be totally accepted today as new evidence emerges.
So, while we should be critical of Dr. Thomas's claims,
It's also important to keep an open mind.
how does his work hold up in light of modern science then?
Well, some of his claims are actually supported by recent findings.
Like those flash-frozen mammoths we talked about?
The fact that they were found with undigested food in their stomachs,
It really suggests they froze incredibly quickly.
which aligns with his idea of a sudden, catastrophic event.
And what about those ripple patterns in the Sahara Desert?
Are those really evidence of a past tsunami?
It's hard to imagine anything else that could create those kinds of formations,
The geological evidence is definitely there.
pointing to a time when a lot of water moved across that landscape.
Whether it was a tsunami caused by a pole shift or something else entirely.
That's still up for debate. It's like we're piecing together clues from the past
Trying to understand what might have happened.
and what it could mean for our future.
And while some of Dr. Thomas's ideas might be speculative.
They're not entirely outside the realm of possibility.
So speaking of possibilities,
Let's talk about something that's actually happening right now.
the magnetic pole shift,
You mentioned that we're overdue for a flip.
where north becomes south and south becomes north.
How worried should we be about that?
Well, it's definitely something to pay attention to.
The magnetic poles are always moving.
And a full reversal is a natural process.
It's happened many times throughout Earth's history,
The problem is the Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker.
and that makes us more vulnerable,
Think of the magnetic field as a shield.
protecting us from harmful radiation from the sun.
If that shield weakens, we're more exposed.
And what could happen then?
Well, solar storms could disrupt satellites, communication systems.
Even the power grid.
Imagine widespread blackouts, technological chaos.
So even if a magnetic pole shift isn't the end of civilization like Dr. Thomas suggests,
It could still have a huge impact on our way of life.
especially since we're so dependent on technology these days,
It really highlights how important it is to understand these natural processes.
and to take steps to prepare for potential risks.
Imagine a world without GPS, internet, or reliable electricity.
It would be a pretty big adjustment.
So what can we do to prepare for something like that?
Should we all be building bunkers and stocking up on supplies?
Well, I think a more practical approach is to focus on making our infrastructure more resilient,
Investing in things like hardening the power grid?
developing backup communication systems,
They're really pushing for more research.
so we can better understand and predict these events.
So it's not about living in fear,
It's about taking a proactive approach.
being prepared for whatever challenges might come our way.
And, even if Dr. Thomas's predictions about a cataclysmic pole shift never actually happen,
His work serves as a good reminder,
to be prepared, to think critically.
and to understand the forces that shape our world.
It's like he's giving us a little wake-up call.
To pay attention to the bigger picture.
And that brings us back to the big question.
What can we do, even in small ways?
To mitigate risks.
Not just from a potential pole shift.
But from any unforeseen event that could disrupt our lives.
It's something to think about for sure.
And something we'll continue to explore as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, it's all about being proactive, right?
Exactly, not reactive.
So what can we actually do to prepare?
Well, on a personal level, I think having an emergency kit is a good start.
Makes sense.
Knowing how to contact loved ones if the phones are down.
Yeah, that's important.
Maybe even learning some basic survival skills just in case.
You know, never hurts to be prepared.
Right. And then on a larger scale, we need to think about infrastructure.
Making sure it can withstand disruptions.
Hardening the power grid against solar flares, for example.
Creating backup communication systems.
And investing in research so we can better predict these events.
It's crazy how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, one little disruption can have a ripple effect across the whole planet.
Which is why these conversations are so important.
Absolutely. We need to raise awareness and encourage people to think critically.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
We've covered a lot of ground.
From cataclysmic pole shifts to lost civilizations.
And the very real threat of a magnetic pole flip.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And while the future might be uncertain,
we can face it with a sense of curiosity, preparedness.
And maybe even a little optimism.
Optimism that we can learn from the past, adapt to the present.
And build a more resilient future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, hit us with it.
Given everything we've discussed today, what can you do, even in a small way,
to be more prepared?
To contribute to a more resilient society?
It's a question worth asking yourself.
And who knows, maybe it'll spark some positive change.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
And be sure to share your thoughts with us online.
Use the hashtag #DeepDivePoleShift.
We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning.
And keep diving deep.
If you enjoyed this episode of While We Were Distracted, be sure to watch the video that inspired it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.